Welcome back. You're watching the Citizen Business Center, and as we have mentioned throughout the whole bulletin tonight, we're taking a strong focus on where next for the sugar industry, which has this week, the road has been exposed through an independent audit that showed fake sugar imports, and there's quite a number of other issues as well that's plaguing the industry currently. And joining us tonight, we have Noor Mohammed, who's the chairman of the Agriculture Committee in Parliament. We've got Benjamin Langat, chairman of the Finance Committee, as well as Ayub Savula, the MP for Lugari, who will tonight represent the Sugar Belt. Thank you all so much for joining us. And on phone, we'll be joined by Saulo Busolo, who will be joining us live on phone, and he'll be telling us his opinions. Of course, he's a former chairman of the now defunct Kenya Sugar Board. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Clearly, the fall of the sugar industry has been steep, had, and most terribly expected. Yet nothing was done about it. Just in a few words, and perhaps as an introduction, do tell us, Mr. Mohammed, what in your few words is the state of Kenya's sugar industry today?
Surely, thank you very much. The sugar industry in Kenya today is almost on its knees, I should say so. And this has been on and off for a very long time, as you're very much aware. The government has bailed out the sugar industries. They have enjoyed for a long time protections of the government, which is not the case now, as you know. Because of the liberal market of the world, we are members of the COMESA, we are members of WTO. Those scenarios have changed the situation that at least we can no longer be able to afford to protect the industry.
Thank you so much. Mr. Savula?
The main issue affecting the sugar industry in Kenya is lack of government commitment to protect the sugar industry from massive sugar imports, basically from non-COMESA countries like Brazil. You realize that the last 3 or 4 months, 22,000 metric tons of sugar have entered into the country through the port of Mombasa, transported to Uganda, repackaged back and brought back to the Kenyan market. The sugar is not a COMESA sugar. The sugar comes from Brazil. The cost of production of sugar in Brazil is $300 per metric ton, and the cost of production of sugar in Kenya is $700 per metric ton. So you can't do a comparison when you take it to the market. Secondly, the issue that has brought the sugar industry on its knee in this country is lack of a clear agenda on how to privatize the government-owned mills, Sony, Chemelil, Miwani, Mohoroni, Zoya, so that you allow private capital to be injected in to revamp their crushing capacity through installation of new machine and new technology.
Okay, and of course we'll be talking specifically about privatization, and that's exactly why we have Mr. Langat here with us tonight. In a very few words, what is the state of Kenya's sugar industry?
Thank you very much. I think I must say sugar sector as it is today is a sector that is full of serious challenges which have actually come because of mistakes of the past, and also because the sector has enjoyed a bit of protection, serious protection from outside forces, which are no longer sustainable as we are today, because everybody is demanding liberalization, and it's difficult to justify anymore why we should really protect our sugar industries. But having said that, I want to say the promises, there is also a big promise, because we have a huge market, there is enough demand in the country. I think our way forward would really lie on how we manage the challenges, so that this huge potential which is in the market, especially the opening up of the East Africa community, the COMESA region, we can satisfy that market. But I think there are challenges, but the good thing is that there are very good promises, which, if you handle the challenges properly at this stage.
All right.
Yeah.
Of course, thank you so much for your opening statements. And Savula, I'm going to ask you this because it's a question that everybody has asked. What interest does Savula have in the sugar industry? And I need that because so that as we continue the conversation, I'll know what side of the table to speak from.
Thank you so much. First of all, I'll declare my interest. I've been a distributor of sugar, and as a businessman, I do distribute sugar. Secondly, I protect the interests of the farmers, because you find that West Kenya and Butali Sugar companies draw their raw material from Lugari constituency, where I represent. That's why I've been vocal on these issues of the sugar industry. If the sugar industry collapses in Western Kenya, we'll go the same way Pan Paper has gone. That's why I'm very vocal against the cheap imports. And cheap imports have affected Mumias Sugar and also the bad management.
All right. Talking of Mumias Sugar, and Mr. Nur, this is something that you mentioned this week. The names have been dropped, the expose has been done, but what will really be done to those that have been accused of crippling the sugar sector?
We have been addressing the issue of sugar sector for almost 1.5 years now, as a result of the petition that was presented to us through the parliament by the stakeholders. But when we went into investigation, we find it is more than meet the eye. And that is, we went beyond what the petitioners have prayed for, and we went into a detailed investigation. The issue of Mumias is specific, is very critical, but originally we were looking at the sector in its own entirety. But the crisis in Mumias has just become so big, because Mumias, as you know, is almost 60% producer of sugar in this country.
Yes. And
any small hitches in sugar in Mumias always affect the entire sugar sector. But as we have got the report from KPMG, but it is not our report. It is not we who have tasked the KPMG to do an investigation on behalf of Parliament or on behalf of Parliamentary Committee for Agriculture. It was the management and the board of Mumias Sugar. But we insisted that at least we must get the copy of the report, which we have just been given last week. And that has been holding us for a very long time. And we have really demanded for that. And it has come to our attention that it's a very detailed report. Some issues that is of not our concern, because it's administrative, mismanagement. A lot of issues has been mentioned in that report.
All right. And of course, with that report comes the issue of leadership and the institutional framework of the sugar industry. And I'd like us to now speak to Saulo Busolo, who's a former chairman of the Kenya Sugar Board, is joining us on phone. Mr. Saulo, if you can hear me, after the shutdown of the Kenya Sugar Board, what's the current institutional framework of the sugar industry? Who is in charge? Where does the buck stop?
Thank you very much, and I also appreciate the challenges that you have. We are really committed, and I think their voice is being heard, and as farmers, we are very happy with them. Now, the fact, as we speak now, after the dissolution of Sugar Board and other commodity bodies, they have stopped dealing with the Directorate of Sugar, which is under the AFA board. So in terms of perhaps, to be strictly speaking, the buck stops with the AFA board, because the AFA board is the overall body now that is in charge of direction of policy, and the Directorate of Sugar is in charge of management. So that's where, in my view, the buck stops.
All right.
AFA board.
All right, thank you so much. So he says AFA board is where the buck stops with, and of course that it is on paper, that's where it's supposed to be. But should there be a different way of managing the leadership in the sugar industry, Savula?
First of all, I'll say that AFA board is not in existence. The law came into force recently. They have not constituted the board, because elections have to be held so that they can elect the directors of AFA. There is an interim management committee headed by an acting director general called Busolo. But that's not the case. To solve the sugar industry problem in Kenya, first fix the outdated machine, the old machine Chemelil has, Miwani and Nzoia, so that you can produce sugar at a lower cost, at least at $300 or $400 per ton, so that you can compete with other COMESA member countries. But secondly, fix the issue of sugar importation. The sugar importation, COMESA is not a threat to Kenya, because we know very well that Egypt is a net importer of sugar. Egypt imports their sugar from Brazil, they repackage in Egypt and send it to the Kenyan market. If we investigate how Egypt does its business, you'll find that Egypt needs sugar more than Kenya, so they import their sugar from Brazil. If we fix the import, then we reduce the cost of production, restructure the management of all the sugar factories, we are game.
All right. And how can those loopholes be sealed? You know, all these importations you're talking about, Savula, and of course there's also the non-traditional imports that come in from Tanzania, from Uganda, which cannot be, you know, just taken on step by step. Mr. Langat, what loopholes, how do you think some of these importation loopholes can be sealed?
I think if we were to really say we want to protect ourselves from imports, I think, to me, I will say we'll miss the point. Because what we should be talking in Kenya is how do we make our companies, our sugar companies, more efficient to produce at low cost, so that really we are competitive, so that we are not crybabies saying, oh, we should protect ourselves. I already said it is no longer possible to cushion ourselves against the imports, because the world is becoming liberalized, the world is becoming open up, and therefore, I think we should be talking about the way Mheshimiwa said here,
yes,
that look at how the machines we have. But in addition, let us look at the sugar, the growing of sugar. In other countries, for example, you will find breeds of sugar being grown mature at 6 months, 7 months. In Kenya, we still insist sugar must take 24 months. That's another cost. So therefore, I think we need to open our think outside the box and look at how we can make our companies more competitive, how we can really support them to become properly managed. In fact, the problems of Mumias is not really about you know, the institutional framework in government per se. It's about the failure of the corporate governance within the system itself, within the system of the Mumias sugar itself. And that is what we need to do going forward to ensure that in the event we, and I think this topic will come on privatization, what method of privatization should we adopt? Should we say everybody should get equal shares? No, that is what killed the Mumias. Because we are saying let everybody get equal shares. Nobody will want to assume what we call the residual risk. Who wants to take control? Who wants to say, who will say, I'll lose, I'll be the loser if this thing collapses. But when everybody is equal, nobody takes charge of that place, and that's what
I'd like to add on something about privatization just very quickly, and I want to quote Edward George, who's the head of soft commodities research at EcoBank, and he asks, you know, what are they privatizing? The machinery is old, there are massive debts, no one has wanted to buy these sugar mills in years. Why would anybody want to buy in now? Savula.
What should be the policy? The government policy should be that they should write off the debts, restructure the balance sheet of those companies. Then now you privatize when it's at least a profit-making venture. But the ultimate solution to the sugar industry problem in Kenya, and to compete worldwide, the ultimate solution is to go to Tana River. In Western Kenya, Nyanza and Western, they depend on rain-fed agriculture. And the cane matures between age 18 to 24. We have done a study. If we go to Tana River, we'll produce cane in 6 months, and the cost of production of sugar in Kenya will go down if we go that direction. Second thing, we'll produce cane in Tana River on commercial basis, like they do in Kenana in Sudan.
Yes.
But in Western, we are doing small cane farm holding, and that has actually affected the sugar industry and increased the cost of production.
All right.
Mumias has a diffuser machine. The diffuser machine requires a lot of tonnage of cane to crush. They are forced now to use the millers because the diffuser, there is not enough cane in that region.
And of course, we'd have loved to have Mumias on the show tonight, and I invited the chairman and I invited the CEO as well. They were both unable to come because they've just come from a 3-day closed-door meeting to brainstorm on where next for Mumias. But I managed to get a quote from Dana Mayo, who's the chairman of Mumias, and he said the sugar industry is a viable one, and Mr. Nur, I'd like to get your response to this, but one that needs to have a well-coordinated system of operation from the farm to the marketplace, and he also added that Kenya's facing a sugar deficit. Kenya is a sugar deficit country facing competition from outside, but is the competition playing the rules that the country is being subjected to?
Well, it is a fact that sugar industry is a very viable and very profit-making industry because sugar is very sweet. Everybody wants to have it in his home. But the fact of the matter is that the sugar industry has the mismanagement problem. And the way you have a lot of problems is the government-owned millers. I don't even blame the old machines. Look at the West Kenya. They bought a replaced old machine from Mumias, and today they are making profit. So the issue is not even the issue of machine. One non-stoppable thing that we should not waste time with is that at least there's no more protections if we are to remain competitive in the world market, because we don't depend on sugar. Other countries consume goods from Kenya. So if you stop other people bringing sugar into Kenya, they will stop you taking your commodities to them. An example is an issue that has been mentioned by Honorable Savula, the issue of Egypt. Whenever we bring the issues of rules of origin in the sugar that is imported from Egypt, then they put a thumb on our tea.
Exactly.
They block the tea. The same thing that is happening now in Uganda. They are consuming a lot of goods from Kenya. So if we are to do business with other parts of the world, whether it's East Africa, whether it is COMESA, whether it is European Union, or whether it's WTO rules, there's no way that we can be able to protect. And the only way that the sugar could survive, whether we stop importations or whether we bring new machines, is the issue of mismanagement by the so-called managers in the government-owned factories. The small factories, privately owned, are running up to today with those difficulties, with those challenges. They are running and they are making profits. So the issue is not even the cost of production, it's not the issue of old machines, it's the issue of corruption and mismanagement of the government-owned millers. And the government must pull out totally, in totality, from the business of sugar or any other business and leave it to the private sectors to run those business. And they only create an environment that the government, the business can be run.
What are your thoughts on that? Should the government pull out entirely from the sugar sector?
It should have done that by yesterday. What is the government doing? The government has no business in private operations. They should leave the rules of trade, demand and supply, to flow. They should pull out, leave private capital to be injected in these factories, eliminate corruption, and you are ready to go.
Langat, what does this mean now to, if yes, we are asking the government to move out, but if already the government is bailing out Mumias, how much more money do we need? I read a report where the 2010-2014 sugar strategy, which was done by the Kenya Sugar Board, and they said the industry needs about over 23 billion shillings for it to turn around. Where's that money going to come from if we're saying the government has to pull out entirely?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think if you look at the proposals for privatization, the government has been pumping money to these sugar companies for a very long time. And for example, total for all the sugar companies we are looking at, the government has pumped almost 60 billion. And that is the amount which is proposed to write off. Actually, the parliament has approved to write off 60 billion, which was given as loans to these sugar factories. So I think for us to minimize, to reduce our losses, it is time government should get out of this business, because over time it has only been getting more money from government, getting more money from government. And somebody saying, what are they privatizing? The machines are very old. We even said, even if we sold it for 1 shilling, as long as the government has pulled out of this thing, it is better for government to receive 1 shilling than to continue investing billions and billions of shillings every year without return. So really, I think we don't need to invest more money, especially in terms of giving to factories. If we can do it in terms of building the capacities of the farmers, yeah, in terms of extension, research, new breeds of sugar cane so that they can mature earlier, but not really investing in the factory. Let the factories be financed by private sector, the people will take a final risk, and I think that will be the right thing. Kenya, I come from Kericho, and Kericho is about tea, and tea is 100% private sector, and I can say for this last year, the sector has been doing very well. And I think it is beginning to do very well in the private sector.
All right. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Langat. Of course, we hope the private sector will find it attractive enough to be interested in the sugar sector. And I'd just like to rope in Mr. Busolo once more before we wind up. Mr. Busolo, the Agriculture Cabinet Secretary Kosgei had placed a ban on sugar import licenses. Tell us, what's the status of that, and has it helped very quickly as we wind up?
Come again, please.
Mr. Busolo, I was mentioning that the Agriculture Cabinet Secretary Felix Kosgei has placed a ban on sugar import licenses. What is the current status of that, and do you think it has helped in any way?
I think there are a few problems here. This issue of import. There is too much talk about import, but I don't think people actually understand the issue. This country is deficient in sugar production. Whichever way you look at it, you can't do without import. That's one. Two, countries like Mauritius used to export all the sugar they produce and used to import all the sugar that they required, which is cheaper for them from Brazil. I've had one of the Pasabula talk about Egypt being deficient so they can't export sugar. No, the rules of COMESA are such that if there's one or two things to sugar, so it qualifies to export its sugar. But the fact of the matter is that this country is deficient in sugar, it can't do without import. So banning and banning is not helping the situation. The issue in this country is really an issue of policy. What is government policy towards the sugar industry? Policy in terms of even the size, the issue of Mumias. I appreciate Mr. Mohamed Noor's report on what's going on and KTMC report. But I don't seem to understand that the issue of size, Mumias is so big that to manage Mumias, you can't manage. You are just managing inefficiencies because the logistics of hauling sugar, not only from within, but from Busia, is so huge that any manager of Mumias cannot handle the issue of milling sugar in Mumias. Handling the issue of hauling sugar, inefficiencies in logistics, etc. Then there's the issue of also the business strategy. What business strategy do these sugar companies? In all of them just produce sugar. But what business strategy do they have? If you go to supermarkets in Bungoma where I am right now, the supermarkets are selling sugar at 8 shillings. Zoya sugar, which is in Bungoma, is selling at 104. Which Kenyan is going to be patriotic to buy sugar from Zoya package at 104, sugar from the supermarket in Bungoma package at 88? Monia sugar is about 115. These are the real issues that we have to deal with. Business strategy is wrong. Size is wrong. Big size has proven is wrong. The truth of the matter is that small factors like Putali, Transmara, Sukari,
all right, Mr. Busolo, we really need to wind up on our side, and I'd just like to take some final...
And this is where I wish Mr. Mohamed Committee, the Agriculture Committee, to look into how the management of the parastatal farm, the overextended workforce, the procurement rules. In other words, the simple question is, why is sugar produced in Kenya more expensive than elsewhere? If it was expensive, the private investors will not be in the sugar industry in Kenya. And they're still coming, they're still applying, so many of them want to come, which demonstrates that it's profitable.
All right, thank you.
In the private sector.
All right, thank you.
Parastatal is very expensive.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Busolo. They're raising quite some critical points. And as we wind up, gentlemen, I just want to get your points on what, very quickly, as we wind up, very quickly, sir.
Thank you. I just want to assure Kenyans that despite the challenges and the difficulties and the turbulences that the sugar industry is facing at the moment, I'm sure with Mumias or without Mumias, the farmers are very safe. The few private millers which has come up is capable of buying meals or sugar cane from the farmers, and they pay them promptly. We're happy that Busia is now building another factory, and with those few private sectors who have just come in, I'm sure the farmers are safe and there's no point of alarm on this part.
Savula, very quickly as we wind up.
Restructure the entire sugar sector, subsector, revamp the management of paracetal owned, streamline the strategies of the sugar industry's operation, then diversify. Sugar should only be a byproduct, but produce electricity, produce ethanol. That is the way to go.
All right. Mr. Langat, your final point?
Thank you. Looking forward to privatization. I hope with the private sector involved, we'll be able to solve some of these managerial issues. looking also forward to ensure that we, in other countries we produce sugar as a byproduct. Like Brazil, the reason why it's really cheap is because they don't actually intend to produce sugar. They are producing a fuel, but in the process they produce sugar. That is why sugar is really very cheap, because they are producing as a byproduct. And I think Kenya, that should be the policy framework we should be looking forward to ensure that we reduce these costs, and therefore the sector will be very viable in the future.
All right.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Nur Mohammed, Chairman of the Agriculture Committee, Benjamin Langat, Chairman of the Finance Committee, and Ayub Savula, the MP for Lugari, who was today representing the Sugar Belt as well as the farmers. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.